Sergeant Taiwan Park gripped his pulse rifle tightly as the breech charges detonated. The explosion was muffled in the vacuum, but he felt the vibration through his boots as the airlock door buckled inward. Red tactical displays flickered across his helmet visor, highlighting 6 other Marines in his squad as they moved into formation. Breach successful. Squad Omega, advance and secure the main corridor. Lieutenant Ho's voice crackled through the comm. The raid on the slave-trading outpost had been planned for weeks. Intelligence reports indicated at least 30 captives from a dozen species were being held for auction, destined for labor camps or worse in the lawless outer systems. Taiwan had participated in similar operations before, but something felt different about this one. A tension in his gut that he learned not to ignore. The Marines moved efficiently through the station's dimly lit corridors. The artificial gravity fluctuated as they advanced, a sign the station's systems were outdated or poorly maintained. The first resistance came at an intersection. 2 guards with makeshift armor and black market weapons. They fell quickly to the Marines' coordinated fire. Main holding area is 50 meters ahead. Lieutenant Ho reported. Taiwan, Maicha, secure the east approach. The rest with me. Taiwan acknowledged the order and moved into position with Corporal Maicha. They took cover behind a bulkhead, weapons trained on the corridor that led to what the schematics identified as storage rooms. As the main team engaged with more guards ahead, Taiwan noticed something odd. A slight discoloration on the wall that didn't match the station's layout in their briefing. Something's not right, he muttered, switching to thermal vision. There, a faint heat signature behind the wall, where nothing should be. I'm checking something, he told Maicha. Cover me. Taiwan, what are you doing? Stick to the plan, she hissed, but he was already moving. Running his gloved hand along the wall, he found a nearly invisible seam. A hidden door. Using his combat knife, he pried at the edge until a panel slid away, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft barely wide enough for a person in combat armor. Park, report your position. Lieutenant Ho demanded through the comm. Taiwan hesitated only a second. Found a hidden passage, sir. Investigating potential hostages. Without waiting for a response, he squeezed into the passage. The shaft extended about 10 meters before opening into a small room that didn't appear on their schematics. The space was dark except for a faint, pulsing blue light coming from the corner. Taiwan switched off his tactical lights and removed his helmet for a better look. In the corner, curled into a protective ball, was a slender figure. The source of the blue light was her skin, a soft bioluminescence that flickered like a candle in wind. She was clearly not human, though humanoid in form. Her limbs were long and graceful, her features delicate with large, dark eyes that stared at him in terror. It's okay, Taiwan said softly, setting down his weapon. I'm not going to hurt you. The alien girl pressed herself further into the corner, the blue light of her skin pulsing more rapidly. Taiwan noticed restraints around her wrists, connected to a power unit on the wall, some kind of energy shackles. I'm here to help, he said, moving slowly towards the power unit. My name is Taiwan. I'm a soldier. He pointed to the emblem on his armor. Earth Alliance Marines. The girl watched him warily as he examined the power unit. It was simple enough, a standard control panel with a biometric lock. Taiwan pulled a decoder from his equipment belt and attached it to the panel. After a few seconds, the device beeped, and the shackles deactivated with a soft click. The alien girl looked at her freed wrists in disbelief. When Taiwan offered his hand, she hesitated, then slowly reached out. Her fingers were cool to the touch, and as they connected with his skin, Taiwan felt a strange sensation, like a gentle current passing through his mind, carrying impressions of fear, confusion, and a cautious hope. Can you understand me? He asked. She didn't speak, but the luminescence of her skin changed from the panicked, erratic pulses to a steadier, calmer glow. Taiwan helped her stand. She was taller than he expected, nearly his height, but so thin she seemed fragile. "Tai-1, what the hell is going on?" "Report." Lieutenant Ho's voice blared through his helmet on the floor. Tai-1 picked up the helmet. "Found a captive, sir. Hidden room, not on the schematics. Bringing her out now." When he turned back, the alien girl had moved closer to him, studying his face with intense curiosity. Her large eyes reflected the dim light of the room, and Tai-1 realized they weren't simply dark. They seemed to contain pinpoints of light, like stars in a night sky. "We need to go," he said, gesturing toward the passage. "There are others like me here to help." As he moved toward the exit, the girl suddenly grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. The luminescence in her skin brightened, and that strange mental current returned, this time carrying a clear impression: fear of being left behind. "I won't leave you," Tai-1 assured her. "You're safe now." The extraction team found them moments later, Tai-1 leading the alien girl through the maintenance shaft. When the medics approached to examine her, she refused to release her hold on Tai-1's arm, her skin pulsing with anxiety. "She won't let go of me," Tai-1 explained to Lieutenant Ho as they prepared to return to their ship. The lieutenant shook his head. "Breaking formation, entering an unsecured area alone. You violated at least 5 protocols today, Park." Tai-1 glanced at the alien girl, now wrapped in a thermal blanket, but still clinging to his arm. Her luminescence had steadied into a soft glow that seemed to brighten whenever he looked at her. "With respect, sir," he replied, "some things are more important than protocol." As they boarded the transport ship, Tai-1 wondered what would happen to her once they returned to base. Alliance procedure for rescued aliens was complicated at best. What he didn't realize yet was that his life had just become irrevocably intertwined with hers, and that the simple act of mercy in a hidden room would change the course of 2 civilizations. The Alliance research station on Mars was not built for comfort. The stark white walls and sterile environments were designed for efficiency, not welcoming alien refugees. Tai-1 sat across from the alien girl in the small living quarters they had been assigned. 3 days had passed since the rescue, and she still hadn't spoken a word that anyone could understand. "We need to call you something," Tai-1 said, pointing to himself. "I'm Tai-1." Then he pointed to her, raising his eyebrows in question. The alien girl watched him intently. Her blue luminescence had settled into a steady glow that occasionally brightened when she seemed interested in something. She tilted her head and made a sound like flowing water, a series of liquid tones that human vocal cords could never reproduce. Tai-1 tried to repeat it and failed miserably. The girl's skin flashed briefly with a pattern that he was beginning to recognize as amusement. Dr. Hana Jin entered the room carrying a digital tablet. She was the lead xenolinguist assigned to the case, a small woman with kind eyes and infinite patience. "Any progress?" she asked. Tai-1 shook his head. "The translation software isn't finding any matches. It's like her language doesn't exist in the database." Dr. Jin sat down beside them. "That's because it probably doesn't. The Alliance has cataloged over 300 alien languages, but we're finding new ones all the time." She showed them the tablet. "I've prepared some basic communication exercises. Pictures, mostly. Let's see if we can establish a foundation." The first image was of water. The alien girl immediately brightened and made the flowing sound again. "Interesting," Dr. Jin noted. "Water seems significant in her language." They progressed through pictures of food, shelter, people, and basic actions. The girl was remarkably quick to understand the exercise, pointing to objects in the room that matched the images. When shown a picture of stars, she became excited, touching the tablet and then pointing upward. "I think she's trying to tell us about her home," Tai-1 suggested. Dr. Jin nodded. "We should give her a name for now. Something simple that she can recognize until we learn her real designation." Tai-1 thought for a moment. "Naeyoung," he suggested. "It means elegant flower in Korean." When he said the name while looking at her, the alien girl's luminescence pulsed once, brightly. I think she likes it, Dr. Jin smiled. "Nay Young it is, then." Over the next few weeks, Taiwan was officially assigned as Nay Young's guardian. The Alliance officials had been unable to identify her species or homeworld, and Nay Young became increasingly distressed whenever Taiwan left her sight for too long. Her skin would dim to an alarming gray-blue, and the medical monitors showed her vital signs weakening. They developed a routine. Each morning, Taiwan would take Nay Young to sessions with Dr. Jin, where they worked on building a basic vocabulary using pictures and gestures. In the afternoons, he would show her around the parts of the station she was cleared to visit. The greenhouse dome was her favorite, where she would spend hours examining earth plants with fascination. Progress was slow but steady. Nay Young began to understand simple English words, though her vocal anatomy made pronunciation difficult. She could say "tai" and "yes" and "no," but complex sounds were beyond her physical capabilities. Instead, they developed a hybrid communication system. Nay Young would use her limited English vocabulary, combined with pictures drawn on a tablet, and an increasingly sophisticated set of luminescent patterns that Taiwan was learning to interpret. Her skin could create complex displays of light that conveyed emotions and basic concepts far more efficiently than her attempts at human speech. One evening, as they sat in the greenhouse dome watching the sunset through the transparent panels, Nay Young suddenly became very still. She took the tablet and began drawing with intense focus. Spiral structures nestled among massive trees. Then she drew humanoid figures with the same bioluminescent skin as hers. She pointed to the drawing, then to herself, her skin pulsing with a pattern Taiwan had come to recognize as sadness. "You're home?" he asked. She nodded, then drew new figures, angular beings with weapons. She made a slashing motion across the first drawing. The next picture showed her people in cages. "The slavers took you," Taiwan said softly. Nay Young's skin dimmed to a deep blue. She drew one more image, what appeared to be a family group, then crossed it out with heavy lines. She pointed to herself, then made a gesture that encompassed the empty space around her. "Your family is gone," Taiwan realized. "You're alone." Nay Young nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. It glowed with the same bioluminescence as her skin. Taiwan felt a tightness in his chest. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. "You're not alone anymore," he said. The touch triggered something, a sudden flood of images in Taiwan's mind. Flashes of a forest with bioluminescent trees, the feeling of worn rain, faces of people like Nay Young smiling, then terror, screaming, the acrid smell of smoke, being dragged away, darkness, cold, fear, and finally, Taiwan's own face, as seen through her eyes when he first found her, radiating safety and hope. Taiwan pulled his hand back, startled. "What was that?" he whispered. Nay Young's skin rippled with apologetic patterns. She touched her head, then his, and made a connecting gesture between them. Dr. Jin had theorized that Nay Young's species might have limited empathic abilities, but this was the first concrete evidence. Somehow, through physical contact, she could share memories or impressions directly. The next day, when Alliance officials arrived to discuss transferring Nay Young to a dedicated sinological research facility on Europa, Taiwan stood firm. "She stays with me," he said. "This isn't standard protocol." "Surgeon Park," the administrator replied. "The facility is better equipped to study her abilities and help her acclimate." "She's not a lab specimen," Taiwan argued. "She's a refugee who's been through trauma. And she's formed some kind of empathic bond with me. Separating us could be dangerous for her health." As if to prove his point, Nay Young, who had understood enough of the conversation to grasp its meaning, became visibly distressed. Her luminescence dimmed dramatically, and the medical monitors in the room began to sound alarms as her vital signs dropped. The administrator looked alarmed. "What's happening to her?" Dr. Jin checked the readings. "Her system is shutting down. It's like a severe anxiety response, but physiologically much more dangerous." She turned to Taiwan. "Touch her hand." Taiwan took Na Young's hand in his. Almost immediately, her luminescence brightened, and the monitor stabilized. The administrator sighed. "I'll need to file special authorization paperwork. This is highly irregular." "Welcome to First Contact," Dr. Jin said with a small smile. "It rarely follows protocol." Later that night, as Na Young slept in the specially designed resting pod they had constructed for her, Taiwan watched the steady pulse of her bioluminescence. He had joined the Marines to protect humanity's interests in the stars. He never expected that duty would expand to include an alien refugee who couldn't even speak his language. Yet somehow, despite every barrier between them, they were learning to communicate, building a bridge between worlds, one picture, one gesture, one pulse of light at a time. Taiwan's apartment in the military housing complex wasn't designed for two, especially when one needed special lighting and environmental controls. After being granted extended guardianship of Na Young, he had spent a week adjusting the small space to accommodate her needs. "Is this better?" he asked, adjusting the new light panels he had installed along the ceiling. They now emitted a spectrum closer to Na Young's homeworld, or what the scientists had guessed based on her reactions to different lighting tests. Na Young stood in the center of the living room, her skin glowing with a bright, steady blue that Taiwan recognized as contentment. She touched the nearest panel and made a soft trilling sound that he had come to understand meant approval. "Good," she said in her careful, accented English. After 3 months, she had mastered about 50 basic words, though her vocal anatomy still made many sounds impossible. Their daily routine had settled into a comfortable pattern. Mornings began with Na Young standing near the eastern window, absorbing the natural sunlight that supplemented her energy needs. Taiwan learned that her species was partially photosynthetic, converting light energy through their bioluminescent skin. When he had duty shifts, Na Young would stay in the apartment, devouring the digital books and learning programs Dr. Jin had provided. Her intelligence was remarkable. She absorbed information at a rate that astonished the research team. In the evenings, they would practice communication. Na Young had begun teaching Taiwan elements of her own language, a complex system of sounds, light patterns, and subtle gestures. In return, he helped her expand her English vocabulary and introduced her to human customs. "Food, ready," Taiwan called from the small kitchen area. He had prepared a meal of vegetable stir-fry, which had become Na Young's favorite. She preferred plant matter to animal protein, though she could digest both. As they ate, Taiwan noticed Na Young watching him closely. Her luminescence shifted into a pattern he hadn't seen before, rapidly moving waves of light that seemed to concentrate around her head and hands. "What's wrong?" he asked. Na Young set down her fork and reached across the table, her hand hovering above his. "May show?" she asked. Taiwan nodded. They had experimented with her empathic abilities under Dr. Jin's supervision. Na Young could share impressions and memories through touch, though the connection was stronger with Taiwan than with anyone else. When their hands met, the sensation was immediate, no longer disorienting as it had been the first time, but still intense. Images and feelings flowed into Taiwan's mind. Curiosity, gratitude, and something deeper, a sense of belonging, of safety. Then a question, wordless but clear: "Why help me?" Taiwan pulled his hand back gently. "Because it was right," he said simply. Na Young's skin flickered with a pattern he recognized as frustration at the limitations of their communication. She picked up the tablet they used for more complex exchanges and wrote, "Other humans fear me. You do not. Why?" It was true that many on the base kept their distance from Na Young. Some were simply wary of the unknown. Others were more openly suspicious, particularly after reports about her empathic abilities had circulated. "I know what it's like to be alone," Taiwan replied after a moment. "My parents died when I was young. I grew up in state care." He rarely spoke about his past, but with Na Young, it felt natural. "When I found you in that cell, I recognized the feeling. Being trapped, being afraid, being alone. Na-young absorbed this, her luminescence shifting to a gentle, rhythmic pulse. She wrote on the tablet again, "We are the same." Taiwan smiled. In some ways, maybe. Their peaceful routine was interrupted the next day when Taiwan returned from training to find Na-young in an unusual state of agitation. Her skin was flashing in rapid, irregular patterns, and she was pacing the small apartment. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. She grabbed the tablet and quickly wrote, "Your friend Jae-ho came to check security systems. He asked many questions, said dangerous to have alien living with military." Taiwan frowned. Staff Sergeant Jae-ho had been vocal about his concerns since Na-young moved into the housing complex. While not openly hostile, he clearly considered her presence a security risk. "Ignore him," Taiwan said. "He's just being cautious." But Na-young wasn't easily reassured. She wrote again, "He thinks I control your mind, that I made you help me." Taiwan shook his head. "That's ridiculous. You can share thoughts and feelings, not control them." Na-young's luminescence dimmed with what Taiwan now recognized as shame. She wrote, "My people can influence emotions with light patterns, not control, but guide. Some humans might fear this." This was new information. Taiwan sat down, processing the implications. "Can you influence my emotions?" Na-young's skin pulsed once, negatively. She wrote, "Bond too strong. You would know." "Bond?" Taiwan asked. Na-young hesitated, then wrote, "My people form connections, family bonds, community bonds, rescue bonds." She paused, then added, "You saved me." Created rescue bond. Very strong. Before Taiwan could ask more questions, his communication unit chimed with an emergency alert. There was a situation in the mess hall. When they arrived, they found chaos. Several Marines were gathered around a table where Jae-ho lay on the floor, his face swollen and airways visibly closing from a severe allergic reaction. The medical team was scrambling to respond. Na-young pushed forward, her skin pulsing with urgency. She pointed at Jae-ho's half-eaten meal, then made a cutting motion across her throat. "What is she saying?" the medic asked. "I think she smells something in the food," Taiwan translated. The medical team quickly analyzed the meal and found a highly toxic compound, a rare fungal contamination that had somehow passed through the station's food screening systems. It was nearly undetectable to human senses, but Na-young's alien biology had identified it immediately. Within hours, the story had spread throughout the base. Jae-ho recovered quickly once the toxin was identified and counteracted. When he was released from the medical bay, he sought out Na-young and Taiwan in the corridor. "The doctors said I would have died if the toxin hadn't been identified so quickly," he said, looking directly at Na-young. "You saved my life." Na-young's skin flickered with a pattern of modest acknowledgement. "I was wrong about you," Jae-ho admitted, then turned to Taiwan. "And I was wrong about your judgment, Park." As they walked back to their apartment, Taiwan noticed a new confidence in Na-young's movements. For the first time since her rescue, she didn't seem like a victim or a refugee. She had become something more, a valuable ally. "Rescue bond," Taiwan said thoughtfully as they entered the apartment. "Is that why you won't leave my side?" Na-young's luminescence shifted into the complex pattern that he now recognized as her attempt to express something beyond their limited shared vocabulary. She took his hand, and the impression that flowed between them was clear and simple, not just gratitude or dependency, but a profound connection. Two beings from different worlds who had found in each other something neither had expected. Family. Taiwan checked his equipment one last time before heading out for his shift at the lunar colony security checkpoint. His standard-issue pulse rifle was clean and charged, his sidearm secure in its holster. After 6 months of relative peace, the routine security rotation felt almost mundane. "I return evening," he said to Na-young, who sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by digital tablets filled with Earth literature and scientific texts. Nayum looked up, her skin glowing with a calm blue light. Her English had improved dramatically over the past months, though she still struggled with complex grammatical structures. "I will be here," she replied. Her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Learning about ocean animals today." Taiwan smiled. Nayum had developed a fascination with Earth's marine life, particularly dolphins and octopuses. The research team believed it was because these creatures communicated in ways that reminded her of her own species, through complex patterns and nonverbal signals. "Stay safe," he said, their standard farewell. "Stay safe," she echoed, her skin briefly pulsing with a pattern that Taiwan recognized as affection. The security checkpoint was busy with the usual traffic: researchers, maintenance crews, and supply shipments moving between Earth and the lunar colony. Taiwan's job was straightforward: verify identities, inspect suspicious cargo, and maintain a visible military presence. The work was important, but rarely exciting. He was halfway through his shift when his communication unit chimed with an emergency alert. The display flashed red with a priority message: Security door HH. Military Housing Complex. Section 7. Section 7. His apartment. Taiwan's blood ran cold. "Command, this is Sergeant Park. I need details on the Section 7 breach. 3 intruders detected in ventilation system near your quarters." "Sergeant," the response came. "Security drones dispatched. No visual confirmation of the alien female." "I'm heading back now," Taiwan said, already moving toward the transport bay. "Negative, Sergeant. Remain at your post. Security team is responding." Taiwan hesitated only a second before making his decision. "Override authority. Security Protocol 9 Alpha. Possible alien abduction situation requires primary guardian response." It was a technical stretching of regulations, but it would work. No one wanted to be responsible for the first alien kidnapping on Alliance territory. The journey back to the housing complex felt endless. When he finally arrived, he found the corridor outside his apartment blocked by a security team in full tactical gear. "Report," he demanded. "Apartment is empty, sir," the team leader said. "Signs of forced entry through the ventilation system. The intruders disabled the internal security cameras. No sign of the alien female." Taiwan pushed past them into the apartment. The place had been ransacked, furniture overturned, his few possessions scattered across the floor. But what chilled him most was the absence of Naydung. Had they taken her? Was she hurt? Then his communication unit lit up with an unfamiliar signal, a series of light pulses that flashed across the screen in a pattern he recognized immediately. It wasn't standard Alliance code. It was Nayoung, using the light language she had been teaching him. "She's alive," Taiwan said, relief washing over him. "And she's hiding." The message continued, translating roughly to 3 hunters, black suits, weapons, hidden below the maintenance tunnels. Taiwan realized Nayoung had memorized the emergency protocols he had taught her. If threatened, find a secure location and establish contact through alternate means. Within minutes, Taiwan had assembled a small rescue team and was entering the maintenance tunnels beneath the housing complex. The narrow passages were dimly lit and filled with pipes and conduits. They moved carefully, scanning for any sign of movement. Then, in a small junction chamber, they found her. Nayoung was curled into a tight space between 2 large water pipes, her skin dimmed to near invisibility. When she saw Taiwan, her luminescence brightened immediately. "They came for me," she whispered as he helped her out. "Same people. Slavers." Nayoung looked up, her large eyes reflecting the dim light. "Please," she said. Her English was nearly perfect now, though her voice still carried the musical quality of her native language. Taiwan sat across from her. "This is a ritual, a remembrance circle," she explained. "My people create them before major life changes, to honor what was before embracing what will be." "You're afraid of going home," Taiwan said. It wasn't a question. Nayoung's skin rippled with a pattern that expressed complex emotions, hope and fear, joy and sorrow, all intertwined. I am not the same person who was taken, she said softly. I have seen worlds beyond our trees. I have learned languages beyond our lights. She touched the small metal fragment. I have formed bonds beyond our understanding. Taiwan understood. After everything she had experienced, how could she simply return to her former life? He had changed too during their time together. The rigid soldier who followed regulations without question had learned to see beyond his training, to find value in connection rather than just duty. Whatever happens, he said, I'll be with you until you're safely home. Nayoung's skin brightened briefly. Home is not always where we begin, she replied. Their ship was 2 days from Illyria when the attack came. The first warning was a sudden failure in the long-range communications array. Then the proximity alarms blared as a sleek, unmarked vessel dropped out of hyperdrive directly in their path. Battle stations. Admiral Sun's voice echoed through the ship. Unknown vessel has deployed electromagnetic disruption field. Weapons systems compromised. Taiwan rushed to the armory, where the security team was preparing for possible boarding. Nayoung followed close behind. I know that ship, she said, her skin pulsing with recognition. It belongs to Credor, the slave master who captured me. His specialty is disabling vessels and taking high-value targets. They're after you, Taiwan realized. Nayoung nodded. And revenge for the network we helped dismantle. The ship shuddered as the enemy vessel locked onto them with a tractor beam. Warning lights flashed as the outer airlock registered unauthorized access attempts. They're boarding through the lower cargo bay, Lieutenant Day reported. Security teams are responding, but our weapons are malfunctioning due to the EMP field. Nayoung's skin suddenly brightened with an idea. Their visors, they use enhanced optics for targeting in low light. I can disrupt them. Taiwan understood immediately. The environmental controls, can you access them from here? Working together, they rerouted control of the ship's lighting systems to a portable terminal. As the boarding party forced their way through internal doors, Nayoung prepared a trap. Now, Taiwan shouted as the first of the slavers rounded the corner into the main corridor. Nayoung activated the sequence she had programmed. Every light panel in the corridor began flashing in a complex, rapidly changing pattern, a modified version of her people's communication lights, but amplified to overwhelming intensity. The effect on the boarders was immediate. Their enhanced visual systems, designed to amplify light in dark environments, were overloaded by the sudden strobing brilliance. They staggered, disoriented and blinded, clutching at their helmets. Taiwan led the security team forward, using standard-issue restraints to secure the incapacitated boarders. The ship's captain was among them, Credor himself, a scared humanoid with cybernetic enhancements. You won't escape me again, little light, Credor snarled at Nayoung when his visor was removed. Your kind is too valuable, the last of a dying species. Nayoung's luminescence pulsed with surprise. What do you mean, the last? Credor laughed, a harsh sound like metal grinding. You don't know. Your precious forest world has been burning for years. Disease sweeping through your kind. That's why specimens like you fetch such a high price now. Admiral Sun ordered Credor taken to the brig. He's lying, he assured Nayoung, trying to upset you. Our long-range scans show Illyria is intact. But the seed of doubt had been planted. As they approached the planet, Nayoung stood silently at the viewport, watching her homeworld grow larger. From orbit, Illyria was beautiful. A blue-green sphere with swirling white clouds and vast forests that covered most of the landmasses. The landing party was small, just Taiwan, Nayoung, and a team of 4 specialists. They sat down in a clearing near the coordinates Nayoung had provided for her village. The forest that surrounded them was breathtaking. Massive trees with luminescent bark rose hundreds of meters into the sky. Smaller plants pulsed with gentle light in countless colors. The air was rich with scents that reminded Taiwan of Earth's rainforests, but with something else, a sweet electric quality he couldn't identify. Nayoung stepped from the shuttle and placed her bare feet on the soil of her homeworld for the first time in nearly 2 years. Her skin brightened to a brilliant blue that almost matched the luminescence of the trees around them. Then she froze, her glow dimming suddenly. "Something is wrong," she whispered. They followed her through the forest, moving toward where her village should have been. The trees thinned, and they came to a large clearing. But instead of the spiral structures Nayoung had described, they found only blackened stumps and scorched earth. Nayoung fell to her knees, her luminescence fading to a dull gray. "They're gone," she said, her voice breaking. "All gone." Taduan knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What happened here?" Nayoung touched the burned ground, her fingers tracing patterns in the ash. "Raiders," she said finally. "The same ones who took me. They came back and destroyed everything." As they stood in the ruins of her village, a soft light began to appear between the trees surrounding the clearing. Glowing figures emerged, Illyri like Nayoung, their skin pulsing with cautious patterns. "Survivors," Taiwan breathed. Nayoung stepped forward, her own skin brightening with recognition. The leader of the group, an older female with silver-white luminescence, approached slowly. "Nayoung," she said in their flowing language. "Is it truly you?" "Illyra," Nayoung replied, her voice trembling. "I have returned." As the two embraced, their luminescence merging into a brilliant glow, Taowan felt both joy and a strange emptiness. Nayoung had found her people. She was home. What he didn't yet understand was that home, for both of them, had become something far more complicated than a place among the stars. The Illyri Council Chamber was unlike any room Taiwan had ever seen. It was formed from the living heart of an ancient tree, its walls curving in natural patterns. Bioluminescent fungi provided soft, shifting light that reminded him of Nayoung's emotional displays. 7 Illyri elders sat in a semicircle, their skin glowing with the silver-white luminescence that signified age and wisdom among their kind. Nayoung stood before them, her own blue glow seeming almost dim in comparison. 3 days had passed since their arrival on Illyria, and the discovery that her village had been destroyed. The survivors had relocated to this larger settlement, where the council now determined the fate of all remaining Illyri. Taiwan and the small alliance delegation waited at the edge of the chamber. Though they couldn't understand the Illyri language being spoken, the tension was clear in the rapid light patterns flashing between Nayoung and the council members. "What are they saying?" Admiral Sun whispered. "Nothing good," Taiwan replied, watching Nayoung's luminescence flicker with patterns he recognized as frustration and distress. Finally, Nayoung turned and approached the human delegation. Her normally fluid movements seemed stiff, constrained. "The council wishes to speak with you," she said to Admiral Sun. "I will translate." The oldest council member, who Nayoung had identified as Elder Leora, spoke first. Nayoung's translation came in short, measured sentences. "The council welcomes the humans who have returned one of our lost children. This kindness will be remembered. However, the council has concerns about further contact between our peoples." Admiral Sun nodded respectfully. "We understand their caution. Please assure them that the alliance seeks only peaceful relations." Nayoung translated, her skin pulsing with patterns that added nuance to her words. The response from Elder Leora was lengthy, and Nayoung's luminescence dimmed as she listened. "The council says that humans are known to them," she translated finally. "They have observed your ships from afar for many years. They have seen how quickly humans spread across the stars, how your technology changes environments to suit your needs rather than adapting to what exists." "That's not entirely fair," Admiral Sun began, but Nayoung held up a hand. "There is more," she said. "The disease that has weakened our people, it came after the first human exploration vessels passed through this sector. Not deliberately, they believe, but the council fears further contamination. The implications were clear and uncomfortable. Humanity's expansion through space might have already harmed the Illyri, even without direct contact. After hours of careful negotiation, a tentative agreement was reached. The Alliance would provide medical aid to help combat the disease affecting the Illyri. In return, the Council would consider limited cultural exchange in the future. For now, though, Illyria would remain largely closed to human visitors. As the delegation prepared to leave, Elder Leora approached Ta-Wan directly. She spoke softly to Ne-Young, who translated with visible discomfort. "Elder Leora wishes to speak with you alone," Ne-Young said. "About me." The others withdrew, leaving Ta-Wan with the Elder and Ne-Young in a small meditation chamber adjacent to the council room. The walls here were lined with luminescent plants that responded to the Elder's presence, brightening as she moved. Through Ne-Young's translation, Elder Leora explained that Ne-Young needed to remain with her people. She was one of the few Illyri who had survived captivity and returned. Her knowledge of what had happened to other captives was valuable. More importantly, the Illyri population had been severely reduced by the raids and the disease. Every fertile female was essential to their survival. Ta-Wan listened silently, feeling a growing heaviness in his chest. He had known this moment would come, had prepared himself for it, but the reality was still painful. "I understand," he said finally. "Ne-Young belongs with her people." Ne-Young translated his words, but her skin flashed with patterns that contradicted his calm acceptance. When Elder Leora left them alone, Ne-Young's luminescence dimmed to a deep, troubled blue. "They don't trust me," she said quietly. "They see how I've changed, how I speak and think differently now." "They're afraid," Ta-Wan replied. "Their world has been threatened. They're trying to protect what remains." Ne-Young moved to the window, looking out at the massive trees that dominated the Illyri settlement. Pathways of light spiraled up their trunks, connecting dozens of living chambers where the surviving Illyri made their homes. "This should feel like home," she whispered. "These are my people. This is the world of my birth. But I feel like a stranger here." Ta-Wan joined her at the window. "You've experienced things they haven't, seen worlds they can't imagine. It's natural to feel different." "It's more than that," Ne-Young said, turning to face him. "The Council doesn't just fear humans, they fear change. They believe isolation will protect them, but I've seen enough to know that's impossible. The galaxy is shifting. New connections are forming whether we choose them or not." The next few days passed in a strange limbo. The Alliance delegation made preparations to leave, while Ne-Young was integrated into the rituals and routines of the Illyri settlement. Ta-Wan saw her only during formal meetings, always surrounded by other Illyri whose skin glowed with suspicious patterns whenever humans were present. On the night before the scheduled departure, Ta-Wan stood on the observation platform near the landing site, watching the twin moons of Illyria rise above the luminescent forest. The beauty of this world was breathtaking. He could understand why the Illyri wanted to protect it from outside influence. "Couldn't sleep either." Ne-Young's voice came from behind him. She approached slowly, her blue luminescence bright against the darkness. She wore traditional Illyri garments, living fabrics that complemented her natural glow. "I was just admiring the view," Ta-Wan said. "Your world is beautiful." "It is," Ne-Young agreed, standing beside him. "But beauty alone isn't enough anymore." They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the moonlight play across the forest canopy. "The Council has asked me to become a keeper of memories," Ne-Young said finally, "to share what I learned about the slavers, to help prepare our people if they return." "That's important work," Ta-Wan replied. "Your knowledge could save lives." Ne-Young's skin pulsed with a pattern he recognized as deep uncertainty. "They want me to forget everything else, to undergo a purification ritual that will cleanse me of off-world influences." Ta-Wan turned to her in alarm. "Would that be dangerous?" "Not physically," she said, "but it would dim memories, weaken connections." Her luminescence brightened as she looked directly at him. "I would lose parts of myself, parts I value. The realization of what she was saying hit Ta-1 like a physical blow. They want you to forget your time with humans. With me. Na-young nodded, her skin rippling with emotion. They believe it's necessary for me to truly rejoin our people. And what do you believe? Ta-1 asked softly. Na-young's luminescence pulsed once, brightly, with absolute certainty, that some connections are worth preserving, no matter the cost. The council chamber fell silent as Na-young entered. Her luminescence was brighter than ever before, pulsing with determination. The 7 elders watched her approach, their silver-white glow reflecting cautious concern. Behind them, members of the settlement had gathered to witness this unusual session. I have made my decision, Na-young announced in the flowing language of her people. Then she repeated the words in English, glancing toward the back of the chamber where Ta-1 and the Alliance delegation stood, preparing for their departure. Elder Leora's luminescence flickered with disapproval. This is not a matter for human ears, she said. It concerns them directly, Na-young replied. It concerns all of us. She moved to the center of the chamber, her skin shifting to display formal communication patterns that commanded attention. The crowd murmured as she began to speak. For generations, our people have hidden from the wider galaxy. We believed isolation would protect us. Her glow pulsed with emphasis. That belief failed when the raiders came. It failed again when disease spread through our forests. It will fail in the future if we continue to stand alone. Elder Soren, the youngest of the council, leaned forward. What would you have us do? Abandon our ways for human technology? Trade our forest homes for metal ships? No, Na-young said firmly. I would have us learn without losing ourselves. Adapt without surrendering our identity. She gestured toward the humans. The Alliance offers medical knowledge that could save many lives. They seek to understand, not conquer. And what role do you envision for yourself in this exchange? Elder Leora asked, though her luminescence suggested she already knew the answer. Na-young stood taller, her blue glow steady and unwavering. I will return with the humans as the first official ambassador of the Illyri people. The chamber erupted in flashes of light as the gathered Illyri responded with shock, disapproval, and in some cases, cautious interest. Na-young waited patiently for the commotion to settle. You would leave your home, your people, when our numbers have dwindled so dangerously, Elder Leora demanded. I would serve my people by creating a new path, Na-young countered. Someone must be first to walk it. The debate lasted for hours. Na-young stood firm against every argument, her luminescence never dimming. She reminded the council of how the raiders had found them despite their isolation. She spoke of the technology she had seen that could detect their bioluminescence from orbit, making hiding impossible in the long term. Most effectively, she described the slave markets where other Illyri still suffered, information she had provided to Alliance intelligence. Our brothers and sisters remain in chains, she said, her glow pulsing with controlled grief. The humans have pledged to help free them, but they need someone who can identify our people, who can help them recover. As the twin suns of Illyria began to set, casting long shadows through the chamber's translucent walls, Elder Soren finally spoke in Na-young's favor. Perhaps there is wisdom in this proposal, he said cautiously. Not full integration, but a controlled exchange. An Illyri voice in human space could ensure our interests are protected. Gradually, the mood of the council shifted. By nightfall, they had reached a compromise. Na-young would be appointed provisional ambassador, with the understanding that she would return regularly to report on human activities. The Alliance would be permitted to establish a small medical outpost to study and treat the disease affecting the Illyri, but wider contact would remain limited. As the council session ended, Na-young found Ta-1 waiting outside the chamber. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could read the hope in his eyes. They agreed, she said simply. Relief and happiness washed across his face. You're coming with us? Na-young's skin brightened with her equivalent of a smile. Yes, there is much work to be done. Admiral Sun received the news with diplomatic restraint. though she couldn't entirely hide her satisfaction at this unexpected diplomatic victory. Within hours, preparations were underway for their departure, now with an official Illyri ambassador aboard. Ne Young spent her last night on Illyria creating a final remembrance circle. In the center, she placed a small cutting from the council chamber's tree, preserved in a stasis container, a gift from Elder Soren, who had told her quietly, "Carry a piece of home with you to light your way." The journey back to Earth created a sensation in Alliance space. Ne Young became an instant celebrity, the first official representative of a newly contacted species. She addressed the Alliance Council with remarkable poise, her luminescent skin drawing gasps of wonder from the assembled delegates. "My people have lived in isolation, believing it was our only protection," she told them. "We have learned the hard way that no world can remain hidden forever. Instead of fearing the unknown, we must engage with it mindfully, with respect for difference and commitment to mutual benefit." The Alliance quickly established an Illyri embassy, a remarkable structure designed to accommodate Ne Young's biological needs while showcasing the aesthetic sensibilities of her culture. Its gardens featured earth plants that complemented the few Illyri specimens Ne Young had brought, creating a literal blending of worlds. Taiwan was reassigned from combat duties to diplomatic security, specifically as head of the protection detail for the new embassy. It was an unconventional posting for a Marine, but Admiral Sun had noted that unconventional situations call for unconventional solutions. Their work together shifted from survival to creation. Ne Young's knowledge of both worlds proved invaluable as researchers studied Illyri bioluminescence technology, which provided light without heat or energy consumption. In return, human medical advances were adapted to treat the fungal infection that had devastated Illyri communities. 6 months after the embassy opened, the first rescued Illyri captives arrived on Earth. Ne Young stood at the landing pad, her luminescence bright with anticipation. When the transport doors opened and 3 of her people emerged, their glow dim with the trauma of their experiences, she stepped forward to welcome them. "You are safe now," she told them in their native language, her skin pulsing with reassurance. "You are not alone." Taiwan watched from a respectful distance, understanding that this moment belonged to Ne Young and her people. Yet when the formal greeting was complete, she sought him out, her luminescence shifting to the private pattern they had developed between them, a unique blend of Illyri light language and human expression that only they fully understood. "They will need time to heal," she said quietly. "Like you did," Taiwan nodded, "but they have something you didn't have at first." "What's that?" "Someone who understands both worlds they're caught between," he replied. "Someone who's walked this path before them."